Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's contract tip has to do with being a contract detective and you as the agent looking for clues in the contract, in the offer, really in the offer before you go binding to help out your clients. So what do I mean by this? Well, I'm going to give you a few examples, and please comment below any issues that you guys have come up with that I did not address in this video. So what do I mean by that? Well, we are in April of 2021, and we are in a very interesting, fast, you often hear the word unprecedented market. What I mean by that is there are way more buyers on the market than there are listings for sale, and the buyers are made multiple offers, and the buyers are paying way over list price, some cash. We're having appraisal issues, not appraisal issues, buyers waiving appraisals, all kinds of things going on. And we had one closing attorney in the sales meeting yesterday that said she just closed a contract cash where the buyer paid $100,000 over list price, and there was no appraisal because it was cash. So just some issues. Please look through the videos tab on this YouTube channel and browse through some of the other videos I've done. I've done several on this market, as well as disclosures for you guys as agents to make sure you make to your buyers when they are waiving some of the contingencies that we typically see in a buyer's offer. But back to the topic at hand. So let's talk about clues, contract clues. So because of the market that we are in, we are having a lot of buyers that are being very creative in their offers to try and make their offers very attractive to a seller and make themselves more competitive, so a seller will choose their offer over another offer. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have a lot of buyers that know they can get a loan, so they are not necessarily, they are waiving a financing contingency or an appraisal contingency in their offer. So you as the listing agent, number one, does that mean that they're not getting a loan? Are they using a cash exhibit? If they go in with no exhibits, what does that mean? Are they getting a loan and just not making their deal contingent upon that? If so, what percent are they putting down? So that's one thing. Is it really cash, or are they getting a loan and just not making it contingent upon the buyer getting a loan? If they're getting a loan, there's still going to be, the lender is still going to do an appraisal, and the contract would not be contingent upon the property appraising. But if a buyer is not going to get financed or is not willing to pay over that appraisal price, the buyer may still terminate. So what is the remedy for the seller if the buyer terminates? It's the earnest money. Another thing to look at is if a buyer is making their offer with the financing contingency exhibit, and they are putting 10 or 20% more down depending on their credit score, they may be able to waive the financing contingency. So are they choosing to waive the financing contingency, or is that something a seller would want to counter back to waive a financing contingency? If the buyer is getting a loan but not making their contract contingent upon them getting the loan, does the seller want to counter back with the loan exhibit with maybe 0 days for those maybe a couple days? I don't know. You would have to work through the days, but maybe using an approved mortgage lender, your approved mortgage lender that the seller knows, loves, and trusts, and knows that a mortgage lender with whom you have worked with has looked at their credit, just so you don't waste time on the market. A couple of other things is we've had one come up lately where the buyer wrote an offer with no sale or lease contingency, but they had a house to sell. And the reason that the listing agent knew that is because it was listed in the pre-approval letter. So they were getting financing contingency, and they submitted a pre-approval letter, but the pre-approval letter stated that they were approved conditioned upon the buyer selling their current existing home, but the buyer did not want to make the contract subject to the sale or lease contingency. So one thing, you buyer's agents, your buyer's earnest money would not be protected under a financing contingency if they do not sell or lease their existing home, and that is not provided for separate contingency in the contract. So number two, the listing agent, you might want to counter back asking for information about their current home that's listed. Again, I completely appreciate a buyer not wanting to make their contract subject to all these contingencies, or not even having to financially make their contract subject to these contingencies. But if a buyer terminates based on not being able to move forward because of one of these things, the seller is out time on the market, and the seller's remedy is earnest money. So you listing agents, if you are getting offers that have very few or very unrealistic timeframes on some of these contingencies, number one, you might want to look at countering back for more earnest money to account for your time off the market in this extremely competitive market. Or you may want to counter back asking for some non-refundable option money. Again, check through the videos link on the channel. I have done several videos. I've done a video on the difference between non-refundable earnest money and option money. Earnest money by definition is refundable. It's not always refunded, but it is refundable by definition of it being trust money. So look through some of those links, but those would be some options that you listing agents, the sellers, could counter back with. Another issue is you buyer's agents. You can be detectives too. When you get a seller's property disclosure statement with the offer, from the seller when you're making the offer, read through that. If the property is subject to covenants and restrictions in a HOA, number one, you're going to want that community association disclosure exhibit. Number two, if it is subject to conditions and restrictions and covenants, you will want to make sure that your buyer has the opportunity and has access to that document, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, prior to the end of their due diligence period or prior to going binding, if that's the case. And there are all kinds of things in the CCRs that a buyer, especially if we're having an out-of-state buyer, a buyer might not be familiar with. For example, being able to, a certain color that your house can be painted on the exterior, fencing, outbuildings, size, weight limit of any dogs, things like that. Those are all things that would be contained in the CCRs that your buyers need to be aware of. And you will know that because it should be disclosed in not only the seller's property disclosure form, but also in the community association disclosure exhibit. So, also things, if you are buying a property, if you are working with a buyer who is buying a property that is in an HOA, you'll want to look at if there are any rental restrictions. You'll want to find out if the property can be financed with an FHA or a VA insured loan. Georgia Association of Realtors has a special stipulation that would allow a buyer to terminate and protect their earnest money if it turns out that association, that complex, cannot be financed via an FHA or VA insured loan. The time to work through that is when you're writing the offer, not after you're already binding and the buyer has to terminate and will lose their earnest money. So these are just a few things that have come up recently in contracts based on this ultra competitive market. So the other thing, I want to switch gears just a little bit. Agents, everybody is being creative. So you have to really catch your breath and read through everything and make sure your buyers and your sellers are reading through everything and not just, looking at everything, to make sure you have make sure the buyers and the sellers have a good comprehension of the contracts under which they are choosing to go binding, or not, and why not. There is also a certain amount of professionalism that you, as the experienced, licensed professional real estate agent, need to be aware of. And there are a lot of creativity, a lot of agents being extremely creative in helping their buyers draft offers to be accepted. And I would just, trying to think of the right word, I would just encourage agents to be professional, and have a lot of open communication regarding what is going on with their public, to help your buyers and your sellers make informed, educated decisions that are the best for them. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you are working with a buyer and you know they have a house to sell, but they're not making their contract contingent upon that. Yep, they have termination rights, or they might terminate by default if they're not making it contingent and they're willing to lose that earnest money. But it wouldn't be necessarily a license off violation. But I guess what I'm saying is, just remember the golden rule. And if you are an agent, let's say you were a listing agent and you received an offer from another agent without for example, sale or lease contingency, and that other agent knew that buyer had to sell that house first, would you want to know or not? So I would ask you to professionally think to yourself, on both sides of the offer, what's the best method to help your public buyer and your public seller make a good contract that sticks and will go to closing with the best results possible for all parties and the fewest delays. So again, open communication, and with things happening very quickly, sometimes that can be challenging too. So listing agents, please make sure you are talking to your buyers agents that are working with buyers to answer their questions. Please make sure you're having all the information possible available to your buyers agents online, whether that be your community association disclosure already completed by your seller, your seller's property disclosure completed and staying current, online available to a potential buyer, lead-based paint exhibit and pamphlet signed, all ready to go and available to any buyer. And just making your jobs as the professionals involved in this market as seamless and effortless and professional and service-minded, customer service-minded as possible. So, and as I've said before, you need to look at your co-op agent as your customer/client as well as your public person. So comment below, what are some other creative ways that you guys are seeing in your contracts lately? Oh, also, just wanted to let you know too, there is for you in the RE forms, a lot of agents refer to those as the FMLS forms, but in the RE forms contract package, which is available to agents via FMLS and Remind Docs on FMLS and Transaction Desk on Georgia MLS. There is a great consumer brochure that is not available in the GAR contract package that talks about out-of-state buyers. And it's a consumer brochure, what to look at and some things that they may not be used to here in Georgia. So thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to reading your comments below. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.